this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. It has been a little while. It is good to be back. Definitely in the midst of that adjustment to a new season and the summer and all that entails. I was just talking to our guests about how podcasting has not necessarily been a focal point for the last few weeks because the counseling practice that I own, Compassionate Counseling, has grown exponentially over the summer, and it wasn't necessarily anticipated. So we brought on 3 new full-time clinicians, and we also brought on an access coordinator, so a receptionist, so an actual in-person as opposed to virtual person to answer calls, check clients in, collect copays, etc., which has been so nice. So that's definitely been a focus. And then we have expanded Compassionate Consulting Company again and brought on our guest today as one of our newest consultants. So really excited to share her with all of you, have you learn more about some of her specialty areas and what she is bringing to our group. So Katelyn Martins, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
You and me both. So to share with everyone how we connected. So we have worked together in the consulting space. Mm-hmm. So we really streamlined a lot of what you had already created that was so incredible, but it was much more about promoting someone in your practice to a position of leadership. And that freed you up so that you were less in a supervisory capacity and in more of a visionary capacity. And then streamlining a lot of the administrative side of things so that people were less reliant on you. And again, you could free yourself up for some of these other things. And here we are. So really excited. And then as we were working together, it was really evident to me, you bring this level of energy and enthusiasm, and you've created something that is so strong and really had all of those elements already there. And I realized you were somebody that I could actually learn a lot from. And so I could not resist presenting the opportunity to have you come on board as a consultant to share your experience and what you've learned and a lot of what you've created with others out there. So any thoughts on that work and that connection and kind of how that all evolved before we get into your story?
Yes. Yeah, no, I really had appreciated the opportunity to, consult with you and to talk about the systems that we had in place. And, as you mentioned, being able to free up some of my time and adjust systems and, as you mentioned, assign a clinical director to really help support me in that. And just having, your support and your encouragement and, because as we discussed, sometimes owning private practices can be incredibly lonely or very challenging. And it's hard to find someone to, bounce ideas off of or, have conversations about what are these things that you're doing. And I had just really, as valued our time together because it was incredibly helpful. And, as I now have more time available to be able to dedicate to different things such as consulting. And I was thrilled to death when you had asked me, to join you as well. So I had really appreciated both, learning from you as well as now, being able to work alongside you and support others in the same way.
Yeah. Oh, it's been so positive and really inspiring to me. I feel like it can really like invigorate and breathe new life into what you're creating when you're surrounded by people that share a lot of that same vision. You know, you're learning from one another, you're coming up with new ideas, you're innovating. And it's so nice now that we at Compassionate Consulting can really help entrepreneurs at every stage in business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so you're really helping with that kind of next level stuff. So fill everybody in on what in your career climb is relevant to where you are now. I'd love to share with the audience more of this group that you have created and what you all do. And so, yeah, fill everybody in on what's helpful for them to know for context.
Yeah, no. So in regards to my career climb, yes, I always wanted to be in psych. I knew, when I was younger that I wanted to be able to support others, from a therapeutic perspective. And so I had started my career working at a children's psychiatric hospital, and I really spent a lot of time focusing on working with children and teens. And from there, I went on to get my master's degree. I had gotten my LMHC. And after that, I worked for schools with children. I worked for private practices as a clinician working with children. And I continued with that population. Over time, in those roles, I was able to grow and be the director of different programs and really learn a lot of the back end information that you don't learn from school, about the insurance companies and the billing and things like that. And over time, I say we, because my husband is also a therapist. We had eventually decided that, we have collectively pulled enough information to be able to start our own practice. And when doing that, I was, we were just joking about how I had a full-time job and I was, creating a practice on the side. And I knew that I wanted it to be a group practice. But of course, there's a lot of anxiety with that of, can I make this successful? Am I doing a good job? Not only how can I support my salary, but how can I support other people while serving the mental health community? And so there was a lot of anxiety around that, understandably so. But we spent a lot of time, taking the information that we had already had from working in other positions, as well as thinking about, what do we want our missions and values to be, because I think we all understand, both positive and negative experiences teach us what we want our goals and visions to be, especially for a company growing. And so we had started in a little tiny office with 2 other offices, and we started adding, a couple of clinicians who I had known, and they're phenomenal. They were people that I had known just from the clinical community, and we continued to expand. So we had started that in April of 2021, and now we're at a point where we have 3 locations in Rhode Island. We actually have 1 location in Mississippi. We have 28 clinicians. We have 5 prescribers, and we have an administrative staff of 5. That is both, on-site and virtual. And so, in that growth, of course, there were so many growing pains, so many things to learn, but also so many positive things, to be able to, see clients come in the door and, be satisfied and, have these clinical meetings to talk about, how are things going in supervision. And it's really incredible, and I was, I know I've said this to you before, there are some days when I'm still questioning, is this real? Is this a real thing, that we did? And, actually last night we just had our summer party, and, and everybody got together and we had, a great dinner, and it's such a wonderful thing. But it does not come without its challenges, of course.
So what a journey. What rapid growth in such a short amount of time. I think you really highlighted some of the elements of your story that really do set you apart. So you came in with a lot more of that back end knowledge that I think a lot of us do when we make the decision to start our own practices. You had that goal of always being a group, which I think is really significant. So setting it up that way from the beginning and therefore growing probably a lot quicker than those of us who just naturally end up, because it's the next logical step, bringing on a clinician. You did that in partnership with your husband, who is also trained in the same area, which is incredible. So you alluded to, and everyone that's listening, I'm sure, can relate to a lot of the experiences that we have that end up influencing what is to come. So there's challenges, but it's also really helpful to hear that you're in a place where you feel really proud of what you've created. It is large. You have some diversification in there. And so what would you say, looking back, are the biggest things that you recall that have helped to shape some of those areas that you focus in now as a business consultant to help other group practice owners avoid some of those mistakes or achieve some of the success quicker than maybe you did, even though it was really quick?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, in reflecting on that, I think about honestly how much, I mean, I know, you and I had consulted, but actually how much I could have benefited from finding you a lot earlier, quite frankly, and being able to talk about, systems and processes and, are we doing this correctly? Because, as we were discussing, there's a lot of anxiety around it,
Yes.
and there's a lot of questioning of, am I making the right decision? Is this, will this be okay? And so for me, what I really want to bring to other people is to be able to talk about, as a group, what are the systems and processes from both an administrative standpoint and a clinical standpoint that will allow your foundation to be solid and to feel, okay, this feels good. I have policies and procedures in place. I have specific procedures that when I'm bringing someone on, they're trained appropriately and in ways that, are helpful for everyone to be able to be successful, within the company and for their own personal journey, whether they're a clinician or they're an administrative staff or they're a prescriber. So those are certainly areas that I love to look at and be able to assess and help people to really look at, okay, what is working, what is not working. If something is working well, is there anything else that we can add to make it even better, or do we leave that part alone and there's another part that we address instead? So really being able to look at those things, as well as for practices that started from a therapy base, how do you add on prescribers? What does that entail? What do you want that to look like? These are things that I love to discuss with people because prescribers are very different. They have different billing codes. There are different needs that not only are unique to the prescriber, but are also unique to admin. Do we have the administrative staff to support a prescriber? Because as we said, it's very different. They schedule different, they see clients differently. And so being able to offer that support, I think, to me, would be valuable for people who might be seeking those kinds of things.
Right.
And it also allows for better client care, right? If you can add prescriber in and you already have the therapist, well, now the clients that are already seeing your therapist can be under one house, right? And now your prescriber and your therapist can coordinate care and have conversations about clients if the client is in need of something.
Sure.
And it's always nice to be able to offer that, and that's always a piece that we're very proud of, that we can offer both things, and I want to be able to support other people in that as well, because I think it's a great model. I mean, it may not be for everybody, but I think it is an excellent part of, adding to a practice, being able to grow a bit bigger, and being able to offer that to the clients that they are serving.
Absolutely. Okay. So the parts that I would pull out there that you really have come to specialize in from your experience. I mean, growing to a large group practice, there's a certain point, I am assuming you would agree, where you really do have to ensure that whatever you've created can sustain that number of clinicians first and foremost. Mm-hmm. So that would be, your intake process, administratively, do you have enough help? Can your space support them? Can your technology support them? Your hiring process, how you're overseeing everybody's work to make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to and that you're profitable. So that's definitely an area. I mean, a large group as opposed to medium or small is really different in its structure and sustainability. Mm-hmm. Bringing on prescribers, the administrative component. So it sounds like, and from our conversations, there's a lot of differences between having somebody that's in person, having somebody that's virtual, having somebody that is local versus maybe somebody that is located elsewhere, different time zone, different country. And we actually have a webinar that's coming up, and we'll put all the details in the show notes. It's coming up in August, and it is free. And so you really highlight a lot of that. So we'll touch upon that towards the end. And then the other piece too that I'm hearing is really that leadership component. So I'm assuming you've learned a lot of skills about being a leader and really stepping into this role of CEO. Then also this promotion of more of a leadership team, leadership within your administrative team, within your clinical team. So am I missing anything from more of like an overview standpoint of all the areas that you can really specifically focus in on?
I don't think so. I think that is the umbrella for sure.
Yeah.
In regards to things that, I would be able to support people with and, mm-hmm. and be able to discuss. And I think also, that is one thing too, of at the end of what you were just discussing about, mm-hmm. A leadership team and being able to delegate different things.
Right.
I'm also able to support individuals in the same way that you supported me with, being able to look at, okay, I am really running out of time, or I'm not able to focus on these additional projects that I would like to focus on. How can I pivot with this to make sure that the practice is doing well? People are feeling that, I am still connected to it as the owner, and but at the same time, how can I also have the opportunity to do other things that mm-hmm. I'm interested in, whether it's for the practice or individually?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to ask, because we worked together when you were already established and it was more fine-tuning things. What did you find the most helpful early on from 2021 until now? You came in with some knowledge, you had your husband to bounce ideas off of, I'm sure, but what was the most helpful for you as you were figuring all of this out through your own expansion and growing the practice?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me at the time, I was just doing extensive research and really looking at, okay, what are other practices doing? What are other people talking about? Whether it was listening to podcasts or, paying attention to, posts online and boards and things like that. Mm-hmm. Being able to do all of those things and just, as I mentioned, do a lot of research, looking at a lot of things in regards to, how are other people set up? How do I feel like it could be set up? And also using my background knowledge of being a director in a different company or in other companies. Sure. I already was coming in with knowledge of, these are systems that I have seen work. These are systems that I thought didn't work, and that allowed me to structure the company accordingly in both the positives and the negatives, that I was mentioning about, in the same way of, I think as clinicians, we always think about, interactions that we have with people and, we are always reflecting upon, how am I coming off to this person? Am I being helpful? Am I being supportive? And that's a huge component of it as well, which is, why I was so excited to also do consulting, because I really enjoy puzzles and I really enjoy, pulling things apart and looking at, okay, what's working, what isn't working, and how can we do this? Mm-hmm. But as I had mentioned as well, I could have really benefited and probably saved myself quite a bit of time and research had I utilized a consultant prior to the time that
Right. We don't know what we don't know. There
right.
is a lot of information out there, a lot more information now than ever. I mean, you mentioned podcasting, and there are some books, and there are obviously consultants and different things like that. I guess my next question would be for those that are listening that are at maybe an earlier stage on a similar journey to where you landed. So they have that goal of expanding and they want to add clinicians to their team. And I mean, also considering the changing mental health landscape and all of the things that we're seeing in terms of increased accessibility and maybe some changes that are coming with different insurances and some of these big tech companies. So looking back over the last couple of years and your growth, what are things that you feel would be helpful to those that are listening that are in that process of growing earlier on than where we are right now, that would be so helpful for them to hear, that either were beneficial to you or maybe anything that you wish that you had done differently? It sounds like maybe finding a consultant potentially.
Yes, that would definitely be a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to have a very clear thought process about what do you want your end goal to be.
Yeah.
What is it that you ultimately want? What is the size, and are you going to, what is the population that you're going to serve? Or do you want to serve a diverse population? To me, if you know what the end goal is, it's much easier to figure out what the steps are going to be along the way.
Yeah.
And so I think that is an incredibly important point for
Right.
people. Even if you don't have it totally clear, if you have kind of an understanding of what it is that you're looking to gain, and what you're looking for at the end, that's what guides you in the direction that you're going in.
Well, and I would assume also setting aside that time so that you can reevaluate at different points, because it will shift and we
Yes.
very rarely stick with that same complete end goal that we might have felt at a prior time.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think, yes, being able to be flexible with that as well, of, this is what I was thinking originally, but if it does need to change or it needs to be altered in some way, that's okay too.
Yeah.
And I think that those are pieces that, we need to give ourselves more grace with, because it can be hard to do that. It can be hard to be flexible, especially when we have an idea that we are pretty set on. And I think also something else is, there are a lot of resources, in regards to if you are doing insurance billing, there are a lot of resources to working, figuring out working with insurance and things like that. And that is actually something also that I'm happy to support an individual with it from a consulting space is regarding, insurances and credentialing and thinking about those things.
Yeah.
Because even me, myself, in a lot of in growing pain moments, right? Like we have gone through audits with insurance and we have gone through those kinds of things, where when you already have that experience and have gone through it, you can help support others with that as well if they are in a situation like that.
Well, and also you had mentioned the anxiety that can come from trying something new, or you get to a point where you're growing your business and you feel very isolated because not everyone in your professional circle can relate to a lot of what you're going through. But one of the best ways to mitigate that anxiety or to help it to feel more manageable is to have somebody that has walked along that path of what the worst case scenario is, and having that reassurance that you can absolutely put things in place so that if you ever are in a situation like that, you're either decreasing the likelihood it's going to happen or you're more prepared when and if. And so that's so invaluable. I mean, I would think as a therapist starting their own practice, what are the things that we can catastrophize about? Worst case scenario would be having to undergo an audit. And if you've already been through that and you can help someone set up their practice and all of those systems and make sure they're doing everything properly, then it's going to decrease the likelihood that they'll ever be in a situation like that. So that's so invaluable. Anything else you would say to that?
No, I completely agree. And it's very challenging. And as you said, it's very anxiety producing because, we hear the nightmare stories, right?
Yeah.
About the audits and things that go on. And I mean, we even see in the news,
Yeah.
when companies are under scrutiny because they're, doing things that they don't belong doing, quite frankly, from an
Right.
insurance standpoint of, whatever they're doing. But
Yeah.
it's hard to feel almost safe in that,
Yeah.
or okay. And it's, those are things that, as you mentioned, I think when being able to talk to people who have already been through it or have needed to spend a lot of time trying to figure out, how do I avoid this? How do I avoid the system creating like a red flag?
Mm-hmm.
Um, being able to have those conversations, or even if someone is in the middle of one, all
Right.
right, let's talk about how do we try to, get out of that or to make it end faster rather than taking a long time. And
For
those are
sure.
components in our world.
Well, and I think, we don't know what we don't know. The difference is that when you become a business owner, and especially when you employ other people, it's not okay for that to be your line of defense.
Mm-hmm.
We are expected then to know and to do the research and to find the answers and to do things properly. And so having somebody that can help make sure we've considered all the right things, put things in place, and especially if you take insurance. I mean, one of the biggest fears is a recoupment. And as we know, at any point in time, an insurance company can decide that they're going to take back money that they already paid you. So if we have already done what we need to do to make sure that we're in compliance, then we have that layer of protection. So I think to shift, to kind of have this, I mean, this is helping me to feel so much more optimistic. So a lot of the conversations that I've been having with consulting clients, group practice owners, colleagues of mine, just seeing how things have shifted with the current political climate, with our economy, with a bill that's coming up, that I really am hearing that a lot of what can help those of us that are in group practice weather some of what is coming potentially is diversification. So these are all things that obviously you and I focus a lot of our consulting work on, is how do you not put all of your eggs in one basket? How do you utilize the skills that we have as mental health professionals to broaden the horizon and utilize those skills for other things, leverage them in different ways? And, having prescribers or doing some business consulting or, helping out in some of these other areas, speaking, are different ways to do that. I think the other piece is those that are in larger practices that are profitable and sustainable and have delegated and scaled so that the business is not solely dependent on the practice owner, obviously are in a much better position to face the economic challenges if you ever do get to a point, for those of you out there that are thinking about selling your practice. You can't do that if so much of the business is dependent on you. So these are all things that you can help with. What are your thoughts about that? Just thinking about what's going on in our world and how some of what you've done and what you help people with can help us manage in really difficult and uncertain times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioning the piece about the diversification and being able to identify in a practice, what are the things that set you apart, or what are the things that kind of allow you to have more of a platform, or or an awareness of, like you said, things that are coming down the line, in both in ways that can help you or not be so great depending on what it is that's going on, but being able to offer different services within the practice, or being able to specialize in particular niches, especially depending on where you are located and what is the populations around you and what are the populations that you're looking to serve. I think that all of those things are incredibly helpful to be able to think about, how do we weather this? And I know even, there's a lot of concern about things like AI. But I am a big believer in AI. You cannot sit across from a person and feel interconnected with them in like you can in a therapeutic relationship when you're coming to see someone. And so those are things that I always really try to highlight when people are feeling more anxious about that, because that is a very big component, is that personal relationship, being able to connect with somebody who is an actual person. I think that those are the things that do set us apart in our field and allow therapy and practices to sustain themselves, as well as, how you run your practice. If it is a positive, encouraging environment for your clinicians, or your staff members, you will retain them. And that is also a huge piece of that. That has nothing to do with political climate or anything. It's just your own internal climate, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a great point. So with all of that, share with the audience what the process would be if somebody were interested in working with you on any of the areas that you highlighted where they want to learn more. What is the best way for them to do that? And what does the process of consulting with you look like?
Yes. Yep. So being able to reach out through Compassionate Consulting to be able to book a time. So we would have a free 30-minute session to be able to talk about what an individual's goals would be, what are their pain points, what are the points that they want to discuss most, and how can I be most helpful? So that would be how we would start. And then people would have the option to either book by session by the hour, or they can book several sessions together. And, as we were discussing, being able to address whether it is, leadership needs within a practice that is growing, being able to look at systems and processes that need to be adjusted or maybe feel like they are lacking in something, being able to discuss adding on providers, being able to discuss, what are our goals if maybe a practice owner wants to be able to, same thing of being able to free up some time and wants to focus on other things. How can we best manage that so that the practice is still well sustained, but they're able to also focus in other areas? All of these things, are things that I love to talk about, as well as, as you mentioned, we're also doing the webinar in regards to administrative staff, which I just love this topic because we have both in-person and virtual assistants, and they bring so much to the table, each of them. So I'm super excited for us to talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is going to be August 27th, and it'll be on Zoom. So it's 12 Eastern time. We'll include a link in the show notes if anybody wants to register. We just need your email address so we can send you the link. And it will be for an hour. And so, it's going over kind of pros and cons to virtual versus in person. But I'm assuming also some guidance on like finding the right person. What are you really looking for? What are some tasks that can be delegated? What are the benefits of outsourcing to someone for these things? So, and then obviously the opportunity to ask questions directly to you about your experience with both. Anything else that people can expect from that webinar in particular?
Yeah. So for that webinar, so we will talk about the pros and the cons. We will also talk about, how do we decide, and if, how do we decide between the two? And if we're looking at in-person versus a, virtual healthcare assistant, what are the systems and processes that we need in place for them? And also, quite frankly, how do we budget for that? If we, depending on where we are in our practice growth, what is the cost of each of those, and, how that factors into the decision as well. So being able to talk about all of those things will be included in the webinar, which like I said, I'm super excited for. It's going to be great.
That's awesome. Yeah, your enthusiasm is infectious, and that's definitely one of the greatest strengths, because I think that sometimes we can feel really bogged down, especially as group practice owners. There is a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. Like we talked about, there is a never-ending to-do list. And I think really remaining focused on what the purpose behind why we're doing what we're doing is, so that can help us through some of those challenging times, and that we can persevere and come out on the other side. So I think the other thing I want to highlight just about how we all operate within Compassionate Consulting is it's very individualized and it's very specific to that individual. There are a lot of different directions that we can go. We definitely, based on that initial consult, really frame what those next few meetings are going to look like and where we're going to focus. But everybody gets the benefit of, utilizing all of the resources that we have developed, any of the templates that we've created. We've got like step-by-step processes. I know you had created one for when you hire a prescriber. What do you do first and then next? And what are the things you need to consider when it comes to the credentialing and the billing and the administrative support? Similar to, when I'm working with people that are expanding, they have access to everything that I use in my own practice during our time working together. So whether that's tracking all of the metrics within the practice or making sure that you're financially sustainable or performance reviews or whatever the case may be. So it's really a wealth of information and knowledge in addition to that guidance, support, the roadmap, and really taking that like bird's eye view of big picture. Where are you at? Where do you want to be? How can you get there more efficiently and still preserve yourself in the mix? I think that's really the key. Like, a lot of us get into this and start our own businesses because we are either recovering from burnout or we want to avoid the burnout that can come from sometimes working with other people. And we don't then start our own business to put ourselves in that same position. So any final thoughts on what has been helpful for you to balance all of these roles and responsibilities that you have and still feel so passionate and enthusiastic about the work?
I think what has been helpful is, inside of work, I really enjoy, I still see a small number of clients and, and I, spend time talking with clinicians and just, having either lighthearted conversation as, colleagues do, or talking or doing supervision. Those things have been incredibly helpful, as well as being able to find that time to step out, and I have children who are very heavily involved in sports. And so when I can go to a sporting event and just, put my phone away and focus on those things in the moment, those things are incredibly valuable for me. And they're what allow me to continue to do what I'm doing every day and not feel burnt out. And, the diversification piece has been incredibly helpful for that as well, of, being able to do things, as an owner or as a consultant, being able to bring on interns and work with interns, or, being able to teach at a local college, being able to do all of these things are what really satisfy me. And that's how I've been able to do those things. And I really want to be able to support other people in finding what those things would be for them as well.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing everything that you did, but also for entrusting me to help you at the stage in practice that you did, and being open to the possibility of sharing all the knowledge that you have acquired and the experience that you've had to help other people be successful in this space too.
Yeah, no, thank you. I greatly appreciate you, Julia, as you know, and, I appreciate your time and, your knowledge and being able to move on in this journey. I'm just super excited for.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, hopefully people that are listening will get in touch. I'll make it really easy and include that link to schedule a free consult with you. We recently just updated our website and I am thrilled with how it came out. Shout out to Hive Source. They did a great job. So definitely check that out if you're interested in learning more about compassionate consulting. And thank you again for the episode today.
Thank you.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.